Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Valerie Kennedy, the Director of Investigations for the U.S. at Chainalysis. Valerie, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you for having me.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. Since 2016, citizens have faced an onslaught of online disinformation from bad actors seeking to influence political campaigns. The combination of technology, including now artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency, to fund these bad actors is creating a host of challenges for federal law enforcement agencies trying to limit or even stop the disinformation campaigns. As Brett Schaefer, a senior fellow for media and digital disinformation at the Alliance for Securing Democracy, recently said, understanding the nexus of malign finance and malign influence is critical to disrupting disinformation campaigns, especially in an era when emerging technology has made it easier and cheaper for both state and non-state actors to undermine the integrity of online information space. So, how can federal law enforcement agencies and others disrupt and combat these disinformation campaigns? Well, that's where my guest comes in, Valerie Kennedy from Chainalysis. Valerie, let's start at the beginning. There are many ways that's going on. What are you seeing? What are some of those trends around disinformation campaigns as a run up to elections that you're seeing?
Sure. So as you mentioned in your intro, this is nothing new. Nation states have been trying to interfere in US elections for a very, very long time. And since 2016, we've seen evidence of cryptocurrency as a tool that's utilized in that effort. What we're seeing in this election in particular is just increased reliance on emerging technologies that's making these things faster, cheaper, more accessible, and more productive in achieving their aims.
You brought up two things here: the use of disinformation and the use of cryptocurrency. One of the things, as I was doing a little bit of research, is that's how they're paying for people to kind of spread the disinformation campaign. Why is that? Why is cryptocurrency a popular, if you will, payment method versus any other way? Hard cash.
Great question. So there are really two reasons for this as we see them. One is it's borderless. So it's a lot easier for the Russian state to pay for an agent in Western Europe, for example, utilizing cryptocurrency versus actually physically having to deliver cash to them. And the second is this perceived anonymity. So some actors still have the perception that cryptocurrency is untraceable, so that it's a good option for anonymous payment rails. Now that's contestable. We can kind of get into that. There are great tools in place that help us actually see through this financing, but those are really the primary two reasons.
I think the key piece is that perceived anonymity, because they think, oh well, if I'm behind the scenes, I'm using Bitcoin or other types of cryptocurrency, then I'm protected. And in a sense, they're not. In a sense, because of how cryptocurrency is set up on the blockchain, that makes it more easily traceable, specifically for federal law enforcement and others who are trying to stop this. Maybe explain why the blockchain and the cryptocurrency piece is not as secretive as people think.
Sure. So there are tools in place, Chainalysis being one of the providers that actually allow us to trace through cryptocurrency payments and crack some of that anonymity. So we're able to track payments happening on the blockchain in real time because the blockchain is a public ledger. So we're actually able to see those cryptocurrency payments. Now, from a researcher/investigator perspective, that actually means that we have better insights into how these actors are behaving than we did ever before. So from an investigative perspective, it's actually a wealth of knowledge for us.
And for folks who maybe aren't all that familiar with blockchain, maybe they've heard of it or they've seen, oh, well, if on the blockchain you have, end-to-end understanding, maybe walk me through why this is a good tool for investigators and what do they see? Do they see Valerie Kennedy works at XYZ or Jason Miller is in this country? What are some of what's that data points?
So on the public blockchain, anyone can go to a public block explorer and actually see all transactions that are happening on a public blockchain. So like Bitcoin or Ether, we can actually see payments being made in real time. It looks like an anonymous string of numbers and letters on the blockchain. So there are tools in place like Chainalysis that actually help you assign those numbers and letters to real world people, places, and things. So that gets into a lot of what we do in Chainalysis, which is actually helping our customers decode some of those transactions happening on the blockchain.
And then if you can decode them, then you can stop the campaign, or what can you do? Because just because it sees that Jason paid Valerie, then they block Valerie, or they go after Jason, or both?
It really depends on the mission of the government entity, but a number of things. First of all, you can understand the network a lot better. So it's a really helpful tool for collecting intelligence on these actors. We can see which actors are paying to one another. We can see what infrastructure they might be using to conduct these campaigns. We can see the types of people they're paying, where they might be cashing out. Basically, the entire scope of financing that happens in cryptocurrency we're able to track. So that helps us understand these actors a lot better and target them, whether that be, like you mentioned, the individual actor, the cash out point, someone that they're actually leveraging to conduct these things. It really depends on the goal of the agency.
And each agency obviously has a different role. The Justice Department may be looking at it from a law enforcement perspective. Treasury may be looking at it to stop the idea of passing dollars back and forth. And then you may have other agencies, whether Homeland Security or DoD or whomever, also looking for their own. Is that what you're seeing as agencies are trying to understand not just crypto, but the disinformation campaigns and what their role is in this entire ecosystem?
Yes, I would say what's been particularly impressive in this election cycle on the positive side is just such a collective effort by across so many US agencies to really go after these actors. And there are different ways that that's happening. So there's freezing assets affiliated with these actors, freezing the cash out point, so not allowing the actors to actually convert cryptocurrency into fiat. Treasury has been leveraging sanctions more heavily when it comes to disinformation efforts. And all of these things work together really well in a collective effort to disrupt these campaigns.
Valerie, despite the fact that a lot of can be seen into where the money is coming and going, there's still a lot of efforts around the countries that are using the assortment of digital platforms, social media, other things to really push out this disinformation. Beyond, if you will, attacking them at their source of funding, are there other things that agencies and campaigns and others can do to really counter this disinformation influence that we're still seeing ratcheting up during and probably post election?
So, due to the increased sophistication of nation states that are conducting these campaigns, public-private partnership has never been so important. So, we have to look at these as a whole of industry approach. So, we're seeing that federal agencies are increasingly partnering with their private sector partners who have expertise in certain areas of this, like the crypto side or like the artificial intelligence side. And that's where we really have a successful collaborative approach. So I hope to see more of that in the future, more collaboration in terms of actually sharing intelligence both ways, in terms of getting that advanced tooling in the hands of our federal customers to be able to really counter these efforts because they're not going anywhere and they're not slowing down anytime soon.
When I look at this and covered this from a cybersecurity perspective over the years, it was always a very much a one-way share, right? The government took and industry gave. When it comes to this type of challenge, cryptocurrency as well as disinformation, uh, have they taken those lessons from the early days of cybersecurity and applied them? Meaning they're much more two-way sharing. It's much more collaborative. It's not so much, Valerie, what do you know? Thank you very much, and I'll go over here and take care of it without giving you anything back.
It depends is the honest answer. I wish I could say that, that we've fully solved this issue and we've understood how to tackle it in terms of public-private collaboration. I think we'll be trying to perfect that um, for a very long time, but I will say that there is increased information sharing both ways. And that is really helpful to industry in terms of being able to help our customers actually disrupt these efforts. A really good example of that are the increased US Treasury sanctions around disinformation efforts. And in particular, what we're really appreciative of as industry is that they actually name specific selectors like cryptocurrency transactions, like different domains that are utilized, because that allows the industry to more effectively go after these efforts.
Valerie brought up sanctions that the Treasury Department puts in place. This also is obviously playing a big role in combating a lot of disinformation. Uh, can Treasury do more? Can there be other things that can be done along with sanctions to really kind of tamp this down and make it harder, make it more expensive, make it more difficult for these bad actors?
Sanctions have definitely been an effective tool. So seeing those increased and more specific too, again, in terms of naming actual cryptocurrency transactions has been really helpful from a disruption perspective. Um, like with all sanctions, what is really useful is when there's a whole of government and a whole of industry approach to those sanctions. So getting more information into the hands of private sector entities, for example, like cryptocurrency exchanges, that can then actually look for those threat actors trying to cash out or send into those services is really helpful. Multilateral sanctions, so when or efforts, so when we see European countries also going after the same actors is really useful. And then, of course, that coupled with actual takedowns and seizures is effective too. So it really is taking that whole of industry approach, both on the public and the private side and globally.
We've talked a lot about Homeland Security Department, Treasury, Justice Department, but this also there's roles for the Defense Department and intelligence communities to play because they see a lot of this before you and I do, probably based on the level of secret, top secret type of information they're bringing in, the intelligence that they collect. Talk a little bit about the role that DoD intelligence communities can play to stay ahead of these threats and keep people like you and others informed.
Sure. So they, like you mentioned, they play a really important role in particular in really understanding the full picture of how foreign actors are approaching our elections. So they have such advanced collection efforts, and that allows them to see a more comprehensive picture into the way that these actors are behaving. So increasing those collection efforts where possible, I know it's challenging, but letting private sector into those conversations and some two-way sharing is very helpful because then we can also do our part in predicting the typologies and the behaviors that will come from these foreign actors that are so heavily trying to influence our democracies.
One piece that's going to play a role in this is obviously artificial intelligence. These advanced emerging technologies, they're going to be more disruptive because it's going to be easier, right? We've seen some of this in the election with deep fakes, right? So why is AI such a big threat, and what can be done to counter it? What are you starting to kind of questions are you getting from your federal customers around the impact of AI on disinformation campaigns?
Sure. So artificial intelligence and the use of it is not necessarily new, similar to cryptocurrency in election interference, but we are seeing it scale up and also being used in a more sophisticated manner. So that allows our foreign adversaries to take a more sophisticated approach in election interference. That means that things like X accounts are much more believable. They're using more native language in their posts. Where previously a traditional user might have been able to detect a non-authentic account pretty easily. It's now become much more challenging with the use of artificial intelligence. It also allows foreign adversaries to do this at scale. It's a lot cheaper. You don't necessarily have to employ a bunch of people to be able to do this successfully. So it really just helps create a more believable end profile, and also makes this cheaper and faster for foreign adversaries. So it's certainly a powerful tool, and that coupled with other emerging technologies like cryptocurrency makes this a really formidable threat.
And as AI gets better, because even though it's good, it's only going to get better in time. That actually has to it requires the workforce, it requires the people who are looking at these to think differently. Is that also part of the discussion that you're having with your clients? Hey, it's not just about the technology, but it's the people side to recognize, hey, that there's something about that Valerie speech that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, that is a big part of the conversation is the efficacy of naming and shaming and the role that government has plays in actually shedding light on when these efforts are happening and educating citizens on what a clearly and authentic account might look like. So we have a lot of those conversations around when does government step in, which agency should step in what venue should they step in. So I know it's something that a lot of policymakers are currently grappling with, that a lot of government agencies are currently grappling with. And that's an area where Chainalysis definitely engages with our customers.
Valerie, in the minute or so we have left together, what's the big takeaway from our conversation today? What do you want people if they've listened to us talk about disinformation and they're maybe a little okay, this is all very overwhelming. What's important that you want to make sure that federal law enforcement, federal officials take from our conversation?
I would say that our foreign adversaries are using emerging technology in an increasingly sophisticated way to disrupt our elections and to interfere with our democratic institutions. And what we have to do is increase our public and private partnership to be able to understand these threats and counter them more effectively. So I hope we really walk away with an increased focus on advanced tooling, including industry in the conversation, and a more collaborative approach to these takedowns.
I think there's going to be plenty more to talk about. This is going to be one of those topics we will continue to follow over time. But for today, we are out of time. So let me thank my guest. Valerie Kennedy is the Director of Investigations for the U.S. at Chainalysis. Valerie, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Great discussion.
For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Chainalysis.